Hello people, here comes my another video on the topic cerebrospinal fluid, which is super simple. Make notes, make diagrams and revise it at least twice to learn it thoroughly. Now without doing further ado, let's jump onto the topic. CSF or the cerebrospinal fluid. It is a fluid present within the ventricular system and subarachnoid space of the CNS. So, the ventricular system is within the brain substance and subarachnoid space surrounds the brain substance. It provides protective cushion to the brain substance against the bony skull. The volume of total CSF is about 150 ml. It is a clear, colorless and slightly alkaline fluid. It contains inorganic salts, traces of proteins and glucose. But in bacterial meningitis, fluid turns cloudy, which was clear, it turns cloudy. The protein content, which was in traces, it is raised and the cellularity increases. Now we will talk about the production, circulation and absorption of CSF. So first, production. CSF is produced majorly by the choroid plexus of lateral ventricles and remaining from the third and fourth ventricles. So majorly like 80 to 85% it is produced from lateral ventricles and rest from the third and fourth ventricles. Amount of CSF formed per day is about half a liter, that is 500 ml. So in this diagram, here are the lateral ventricles, third ventricle, fourth ventricle, and the purple spring-like thing you see is the choroid plexus. So the lateral ventricle produces about 80 to 85% of the CSF and the third and the fourth ventricle choroid plexus produces the rest of it. Now we are going to understand what exactly is choroid plexus. So if we see the cut section of the CNS, here we will see this highlighted part is the brain substance. There are three coverings on it: the pia mater, the arachnoid matter and the dura mater. Within the brain substance lies the ventricle, that is the cavities. So this is the cavity. Now this blue thing lining the cavity are the ependymal cells, and this is the choroidal artery, the tuft and the choroidal vein. Lining the choroidal artery is the continuation of pia mater and the ependymal cells. So the choroidal artery, vein with the pia mater is known as tela choroidi, and tela choroidi covered by the ependymal cell is known as the choroid plexus. Let us label the diagram. This space is the ventricle. The blue lining is the ependymal lining. This highlighted part is the brain substance. This is the choroid artery or the choroidal artery, and this is the choroidal vein. Now this is the covering of pia mater, the arachnoid matter, dura mater. Yeah, that's it. From this, I hope you all know what is choroid plexus now, right? Let us now talk about the circulation and absorption of CSF after we have done the production. Now to understand this flow chart, you need to understand this diagram first. So let's label it quickly. These are the lateral ventricles. This is the foramen of Monro, also known as interventricular foramen. This is the third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct. Fourth ventricle. Now, this central foramen is the foramen of Magendie. And these two foramen are the foramen of Leschka. Okay. Now, this black lining is the brain substance, and the green or the highlighted part is the pia matter which is stuck to the brain substance. The blue highlighted part is the arachnoid matter, and between the arachnoid and the pia matter, this space is the subarachnoid space where the CSF flows. Outside the arachnoid matter is the dura mater. Now, the dura mater, it forms a sinus here known as the sagittal sinus. Okay, these are the choroid plexus, and these red granulations you see are the arachnoid villi or granulation. This was it about the diagram. Now let's understand the circulation and absorption of CSF. CSF is produced by the lateral ventricles and then it goes to the interventricular foramen or the foramen of Monro. So it is produced here. These are the foramen of Monro. So this is the route of CSF. Now, from the foramen of Monro to the third ventricle and then to the aqueduct of Sylvius. So this is the third ventricle, aqueduct of Sylvius, then fourth ventricle. So this is the fourth ventricle. Now from the fourth ventricle there are three routes. Either it will go into the central canal of the spinal cord. Here is the dead end. Or it will go from the foramen of Magendie to the cerebellomedullary cistern, or it will go from the foramen of Luschka to the pontine cistern. So here you can see either to the central canal of the spinal cord or to the foramen of Magendie or to the foramen of Luschka. Now from foramen of Magendie and Luschka to the cerebellomedullary and the pontine cistern, then to the tentorial notch, then to the inferior surface of cerebrum, superolateral surface of cerebrum, arachnoid villi and the superior sagittal sinus. Let's see. So from these foramens, the CSF moves out of the ventricular system into the subarachnoid space. So this is the subarachnoid space. This is the inferior surface of the cerebrum. It moves up. This is the superolateral surface of the cerebrum. Then these are the arachnoid granulations. So from the arachnoid granulations, the CSF moves to the superior sagittal sinus. So this is the superior sagittal sinus. Now from the superior sagittal sinus, it moves to the internal jugular vein and then into the circulation. Once again, let us revise the route of the CSF. So it is produced in the lateral ventricles. Then from the interventricular foramen or the foramen of Monro, it moves to the third ventricle, then to the cerebral aqueduct, the fourth ventricle. Now there are three routes. First is the spinal cord, the central canal of the spinal cord. Then from the foramen of Magendie to the cerebellomedullary cistern, from the foramen of Luschka to the pontine cistern, then into the subarachnoid space, the tentorial notch, the inferior surface of the cerebrum, the superolateral surface of the cerebrum, then from the arachnoid granulations to the superior sagittal sinus and then to the internal jugular vein. Next, what are the functions of CNS? So it acts as a protective cushion between the CNS and the surrounding bones, protects the CNS from trauma by acting as shock absorber. The brain floats in the CSF under a maintained pressure. CSF controls the change in intracranial pressure either by controlled production or absorption. So if there is excessive CSF, the production of CSF will decrease or the absorption will increase, and vice versa in case when the CSF decreases. Then it nourishes the CNS. It removes the waste products from the CNS. What are the other properties? There is presence of blood-CSF barrier, means the blood and CSF cannot communicate, due to which there are no antibodies in the CSF and drugs cannot reach there. There is absence of brain-CSF barrier, means the brain and CSF can communicate with each other, due to which if the drugs are injected in the subarachnoid space, they enter into the spaces around the neurons. CSF can be obtained by lumbar puncture, which has been discussed in the previous videos. Now the clinical aspect, that is hydrocephalus. It is an abnormal increase in volume and accumulation of CSF inside the cavities of brains, that is the ventricle and the subarachnoid space. This fluid buildup puts pressure on the brain, leading to its damage. Suppose the fluid or the CSF in the lateral ventricles increase. So when this will increase, the lateral ventricles will enlarge, and this brain substance, this is the brain substance, first it was this much. Now this part is compressed, so obviously the brain will get damaged. Now what are the causes of hydrocephalus? So there may be problem in production or circulation or absorption. The most common cause is circulation. Okay, so what can be the problem in production? Excessive production of CSF. In circulation, obstruction in any part of the circulatory route. So if there is obstruction here, here, here or here, these are all the circulatory routes. So if there is any obstruction here, it can lead to hydrocephalus. Third, absorption. Interference with the CSF absorption through the arachnoid granulation. So these can be the causes of hydrocephalus. Now what are the sites of obstruction? So it can be foramen of Monro. These are the foramen of Monro. Now obstruction here may lead to distension of one or both lateral ventricles. So if there is obstruction in one of the foramen, then only one lateral ventricle will distend. Or if there is obstruction in both, then both the lateral ventricles will distend. Second is the aqueduct of Sylvius. So this is the aqueduct of Sylvius. If there is any obstruction here, it will lead to distension of both the lateral ventricles and the third ventricle. So if there is obstruction here, the CSF will not move from here to here. So the third ventricle and the lateral ventricle both will distend. Foramen of Magendie Luschka. So if there is any obstruction in these foramens, then this whole system, that is all the ventricles, they will distend. Fourth is at the opening of tentorium cerebelli. The tentorium cerebelli lies somewhere here in this plane. So the fluid will not be able to move to the surface of cerebrum and hence won't be absorbed by the arachnoid villi, thus interfering with the absorption. So when the CSF moves from here to here, if there is any obstruction at this level, the CSF won't be able to move from the lower level to the higher level. Then the arachnoid villi cannot absorb the CSF will accumulate and it will lead to hydrocephalus. Now the types of hydrocephalus. They are of two types, non-communicating and communicating. So first, non-communicating. One where the obstruction and accumulation of CSF is within the ventricular system before the opening of fourth ventricle. So before this opening means in this ventricular system, if there is hydrocephalus, it is known as non-communicating. Other one is the communicating type, in which the blockage and accumulation of CSF is outside the ventricles in the subarachnoid space, and it is commonly due to the blockage of arachnoid villi. So if there is any blockage in arachnoid villi, the CSF won't be absorbed and it will accumulate in this subarachnoid space outside the ventricular system. Now the last is manifestation of hydrocephalus in infants. So first, increased skull size and unusually large head. You can see in this picture, the head is unusually large and the skull size is increased. Bossing of forehead. Prominent scalp veins. So you can see the veins prominently. Downward deviation of eyes giving a typical sun setting appearance. You can see the eyes deviated downwards. Then widely separated cranial sutures, irritability and loss of motor function, dementia, that is loss of memory, cracked pot sound on skull percussion. This was it for this topic. I hope you guys understood it well, and if yes, then simply click on the subscribe button, which is kind of free of cost for you but means everything to me. So just do it guys. Also share it with your friends. See you in my next video. This is Palak Sangai signing off. Goodbye.